I'm Ann J. Hill, and I made this anthology with Becca and edited it, and there's the picture.
So I'm Becca Grimakova, and I write mostly folklore and fairy tale retellings of various kinds. I've got quite a few pieces in this anthology. Most of them were previously published in Havoc and got a little bit more edited, and one of them was completely expanded and almost completely rewritten. That was Like a Fox, and I actually have plans to expand that one into a novel or a novella at some point. So yeah, I love the fairy tale retellings, and I have another one actually releasing in just a few weeks, in ebook. It's a Cinderella retelling, and it was in Fool's Honor, and if I should have kept it for this one, but I didn't. So
oh well.
Yeah, that's a bit about me.
So I am Mariah Chavis. I know my name, probably no one knows how to, my last name, probably no one has said it right ever. So it's Chavis, like Davis. I like to tell people that it's easiest to remember. So my short story in this anthology is Thorns of Winter, and it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling with hints of Rapunzel. So I actually started writing it as a Rapunzel retelling, and then I saw that this anthology was open for submissions, and so then I was like, well, I think I can kind of blend the two, and I like how it ended up being blended because I love Rapunzel. It's one of my favorite Disney movies, and so it was fun to write. And then I have written a lot of short stories recently, so I have another short story coming out in the Exquisite Poison anthology in August. It's a lot darker even than this one. But it was interesting to write, and so it's called The Assassin's Kiss, and that anthology is about different kinds of poison, so obviously you can probably guess how that one goes. And then I also have another short story coming out sometime this year called Swan Song, that is kind of like a retelling of Swan Lake, but more so it was kind of a little bit different than that. And then my debut novel comes out next year, August 2023, from Quill and Flame. So I'm really excited about it. It's my pirate story about two sisters, and I really am excited about that one too. So
very nice.
Yay. Hi, I'm Bernadette Lamb. I am an author and illustrator in St. Louis, Missouri. My writing does not look like very much right now because I'm going to graduate school for illustration. So I'm focusing a lot more on visuals than I am writing, but I do have some potential like short stories and flash fictions in the pipeline. I have a short story in Sharper Than Thorns called Unfamiliar Stars, and it is also a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, but it's set in space, which is my initial pitch that I give everybody, and they're like, I want to hear more. And it's in a lot of ways basically Star Trek fan fiction, if we're being honest, but I had a ton of fun writing it. Was really inspired by just a lot of fun comics and stories that I read growing up, my love for sci-fi, and my love for twisted fairy tales as well, and then wove a lot of kind of neat themes into it about vulnerability in relationships and healing being the primary theme. So I'm really excited for everyone to read it.
Yeah, very nice.
Were there any specific challenges that cropped up while you were writing or while you were editing that, you sort of had to like get through? And
that's a good question. They had to get through all my mean edits is what they had to
Your edits are great. I'm reading my edits on the one that's going to be in the special edition of What Darkness Fears.
Yeah.
And they just make me laugh sometimes because I'm like, I just want somebody to be honest with me. Like, this is garbage. Thanks. I just like, thanks. This line doesn't work. I was like, thanks. It didn't work when I wrote it, and I knew that, but I had to have something there. So
Anne is very honest.
My critique partner is very honest, and I told her, I was like, I love that you're honest with me because I want to know if it's bad. Like, I want to know if like this doesn't make sense. Like, this doesn't work. Like, I want to know because sometimes I know it doesn't work, and I'm just like trying to make my way through it. Like, I'm writing another short story that's going to tie into my debut novel, and I'm like writing this part and I'm like, I know when Cassie has my critique part, I know when she gets to it, she's gonna be like, this is garbage. Like, what were you thinking? But I'm like, I know, you can help me fix it because I know what I want it to say. But then it's just like, it's not working.
Yeah, you just got to get it done.
because I write chronologically. And so like, even if I know what's happening next, I have to get through the really tough bit. And so like, it's taken me like 2 to 3 days just to get past this one scene. But I'm like, I can't write what happens next. I just can't.
Yeah. I sometimes do speech for text for those scenes. So it's just out and it's like terrible, but like then I can move on. Like I know what happens. We got the bullet points. I can keep going. But yeah, anyway, back to Becca's actual question.
I think one of the things that was most challenging for me was making like the romance plot believable within like a short period of time. And I mean, I wrote kind of a longer short story compared to some of the other ones that are in the book. It's like almost 7,500 words. But trying to write a relationship like from like first meeting to like some kind of like conclusion, reconciliation, figuring out the romance is in that span of time is really, really difficult to make it feel natural and like the reader is actually invested in that. So in my edits, I ended up actually adding an entire scene in the process that I think helped, but trying to make it cohesive and also the world feel believable, but not distracting, so that it didn't like take over really what the story was about. I feel like take the spotlight away. Because I tend to enjoy like all the little tiny world building details, and it's like, no, not all of them are necessary. That would be cool, but not always.
Yeah. I'm writing a novelette that's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I'm having a hard time with that, with even more words of like, especially with making like the Beast type character feel terrible at first, and then like I'm like, how do I make you come back from this? Like I don't know how in these amount of words. So I'm like, oh, I was actually thinking about your story as I was writing it. I was like, how did she, like, I know this is a thing we had to fix, but she did it. How?
I think adding an entire scene helped.
Yes. Yeah.
I also did like skip time, and say like, okay, like helps. 15 days later or whatever,
right?
Which is kind of cheating, I feel, but when you have a short story, you kind of have to do that.
Yeah.
I know I did that in the short story that I'm currently writing. I'm like, okay, how can they get from here to here that normally takes 2 months? How can they do that in like a day? I was like, oh, I can do this.
2 months later.
It'll work. It's like believable. Like 2 months turning into a day. All right, well, we can work with this. I think the hardest thing about the one I have in Sharpened and Thorns is I had to make the curse believable, but I wanted to make it different and unique than any other Beauty and the Beast curse. And so like I feel like part of me knew like this is her motivation behind it, but then I didn't put that into words. Like I had to like dive deep to find her motivation, for the villain's motivation, like the actual beast and the sorceress that's in it. Because I kind of blended the two. So the sorceress is also the beast in the story. And then, and so I was like trying to figure out like, why would she do this? How does it work? And so then it was like, I have to tie in all these other characters. And then I was like, you can't have all these characters. This isn't a novel. You have to have like, you can't have more than like 10. Okay. Like you cannot have more than 10.
Oh man.
What about you, Anne?
Oh, I mean, the whole entire book. I'm like, I completely forgot about my own stories because I was editing so much. So I'm like, oh, yeah, I have to finish mine too. I think the hard thing was because most of mine are related to my novel I have coming out. So the hard thing was trying to write things that don't give things away or like also lock me into, well, now this thing has to happen because you said it in that one short story. So they might be slightly kind of vague because I was like, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot here. So I think that was the hard, I mean, all of them were pretty much all related except for a few. So I think that was the hard part for writing mine. Yeah, that was about it. Sure, there's more, but.
How about you, Becca? What was hard?
For Like a Fox, I think it was trying to expand it from a flash fiction into like a longer short story. I think it's about between 15 and 20 pages now. And it was like such a, I had like the bare bones of the story in the flash fiction, but the ending of the flash fiction is completely different from how it goes in the expanded version. And trying to like transfer that, I had to change a bunch of things, add a bunch of world building, and make it more Little Red Riding Hood-esque, because it did not start out as a Little Red Riding Hood retelling. And then I was talking to Anne about it, and she was like, I don't know if this fits well enough. And I was like, well, I'm going to throw a bunch of elements in and hope for the best. But then that like sort of affected the pacing a little bit. So I had one of my friends who like beta reads for me sometimes I had her look at it, and she was like, yeah, the pacing is a little bit off. So I had to like tweak a bunch of things, and so that was the most challenging part, was trying to keep the immediacy of the flash fiction while also like enjoying the chance to like expand more on these characters and make people like them even more, and like resolve things a little bit more at the end. Like the flash fiction is very open-ended, and this story is still a little bit open-ended, but there's a lot more like resolution too. So yeah, just trying to reconcile the two versions.
Yeah.
I think open-ended endings are kind of hard to do, honestly, because the one I have in Exquisite Poison, it's like an open-ended ending, and I was like, I hope they like this, and they ended up loving it. They're like, we like how it ended, and I was like, well, that works, because like I know where it goes, like I know where she goes after that, but then I was like, but this is where I feel like this story ends. And so those are harder to write, where you give the reader kind of finality, but then you also give them, kind of wanting more. But if there wasn't any more, they'd be like, they can create the whole story about what happens next in their head.
I never realized, but open endings have become quite like a thing in my writing of late. And as a reader, like, I used to sort of I wasn't quite sure how I felt about them once upon a time, and now I'm like, I love them. They're so handy, because like, especially with short fiction, we don't have the chance right now to like expand past that. So why not give the readers the chance to like create with you past what you've written? I think that's really cool.
We have 10 minutes left.
I think that the challenge of like open endings too is that you kind of have to like tie up some thread in order for it to be satisfying, but it doesn't mean that everything has to be tied up. So like, without giving anything away in my story, like it also has a semi-open ending in that like the emotional arc has been completed, but there's external stuff that could go down, but you just don't know what happens next.
Yeah.
And so I remember getting comments and editing too, where people were like, what's going to happen next? Like, are they still in danger? Like, what? They're on this spaceship. And like, I don't know, trying to in some ways like defend where I was at with the story. Like really the most important part was the emotional arc. And like, there is space for this story, to go elsewhere. But because that's not the most important thing, I'm not going to belabor the point or like draw the reader beyond what they need to know at its most essential.
Yeah. I think that's like the key to short stories too, is figuring out how to get so much into like a short amount of words. And I feel like short stories always have some degree of open ending, because you can't like get into every single little detail. But yeah, I think there's a difference too between open ending, where like most everything is open ended and maybe like one thing resolved. Those I don't usually like. I like more where it's like, okay, we get like the main thing is resolved. Like, yeah, I'm not sure how to say this without spoilers, but like yours, like, yeah, the emotional, like the character arcs were resolved. If the character arcs aren't resolved, then the story isn't resolved in my brain, regardless of like what actually happens. Like that's a whole different. So like, yeah, so the action of the story might not be resolved, but the character arcs are resolved, and then it's the story. But yeah.
should we maybe end here and this can be like part 1?
Do we have more stuff we want to talk about? I mean, we can.
Well, I was gonna like ask like what the most rewarding thing, like sort of do the opposite, you know. What's the most rewarding thing?
Ended there. Buy our book. We all
no positive vibes here.
We've struggled so hard. Please buy the book. Yeah, we can end and I'll start another one.